Well, hello there, everyone, and welcome back to our 8th Ask the Attorney segment. I'm Maya Engel, live in our digital studio here at Up North Live News, joined once again by Marianne Wehr. She is an estate planning attorney with Great Lakes Center for Estate Planning. Marianne, welcome. It's hard to believe we've been doing this already for 8 different segments now.
This is like the close of the 4th month.
Yes,
I know.
it's
I
flying
know.
by.
I know.
Over the past
Amazing.
7 weeks, we've definitely talked about a lot of very important topics. And so you mentioned that you thought it'd be a good idea to today kind of just go through everything and do a little review of what we've discussed and tie everything together. But before we get into that, I know we do have a question from one of our viewers that you want to address.
Right. So thank you very much for sending this question in. We love questions. It really is very helpful to us. This is an interesting question. And it's talking about the legality, or it's asking about the legality of trusts and wills, and says more specifically, has to do with the legality of both. It is my understanding that a will can be contested in probate. So should that be a concern, or is there a way to prevent such thing? Well, I think this is a good time for me to remind everyone that I'm bringing information into this session, but I'm not giving any legal guidance. If you really want legal guidance, you have to hire a lawyer who will work with you on your individual specific situation. All that work will be confidential, and that's when you actually have a lawyer. So I'm not giving legal guidance, but I am bringing information, and this really is a good opportunity for information. Certainly, both a trust and a will are legal, right? They're legal documents, as long as they're created under the laws of Michigan, and there's some formalities that they meet. But they are not the estate plan. Your estate plan is something much larger. It is a strategy that you work through your personal situation, your beneficiaries, your assets, what your wishes are, how you want to approach an estate plan. And the ultimate outcome is an entire plan that helps you organize yourself going in the future, and helps your family. Remember, we've talked about it as being an act of love. So whether or not you choose a will or a trust, I am not here to advocate one versus the other. Both are good. If you have a trust, you will also have a will. And whether you have one or not is your own personal decision, right? But a will can be set up to be what a lawyer would call self-proving. If the person setting up the will takes a good, long, hard look at who they'd like to represent their estate, it's called a personal representative. We often call it an executor. But think about who that person should be, and then distribute assets. Think about whether or not, what should go to one beneficiary versus another. And working with your lawyer, you'll come up with whether or not you go to a trust or will. So that's kind of the first question. Like, yeah, they're both legal. Yeah, a will is fine. Probate is fine too. It just depends upon your situation.
Mhm.
So the second part of this person's question is, second part would be about the trust aspect of estate planning. And then she talks about a written document being drawn up by the lawyer or the law firm and signed by all parties, and that this the plan pertains to the wishes of the deceased and how to handle asset distribution, which is true. I often call a trust your rule book. It's your rule book when you're alive, and if you become incapacitated, and it's also your rule book about distribution. So then he or she asks, so is it possible for a trust lawyer and a trustee to work together and thus prevent the beneficiaries their inheritance? So I don't know if this person has had a bad experience, but again, going back to building a trust, building your estate plan, and that results in a trust document, there are careful decisions that need to be made. And those careful decisions is, who will be your successor trustee? And you should choose someone carefully who's close to you, who you believe is willing to take on the liability, willing to take on the decisions, but will also you can trust to follow the words of the trust. So there shouldn't be a situation where a trustee and a lawyer go off on their own, as this is suggesting that they can prevent an inheritance. So I don't know what the specific situation is, or the facts, or where these concerns are coming from. But I would really just say that working with a lawyer to make all of the decisions um, pretty solid. A trustee has liability. A trustee is supposed to handle the assets in the method in which the distribution is designed in the trust. The trustee has a fiduciary responsibility to the beneficiaries. And there is something called breach of trust if they break that. I know I'm just kind of talking in lawyerese, but really the outcome relates to the input, right? So how carefully an estate has been planned, and then these documents are just outcomes. They're not like and then it's important to understand what they do.
Mhm.
I don't know that I answered the question because I don't know the specifics of what drove the question,
Sure.
but I would just encourage really solid planning and strategies.
Mhm. Well, thanks, Marianne, for answering that question. And thank you to whoever sent in that question. If you have any follow up questions, you can always leave a comment in our chat live. And that goes for anyone watching right now. If you have any questions at all for Marianne, feel free to leave a comment. But so going back to where I started, Marianne, what we're going to be talking about today is just kind of a review of everything that we've been talking about the past 7 weeks and then how it all kind of ties together.
Exactly. So, this is kind of a reflection point. We've had 7 sessions. We've talked individually about very important topics. I thought that each one, I was pretty happy with how each segment came through. But they really are kind of a message that spans those 7 weeks. So tonight we're going to bring them together a bit. And like I say, this is a good reflection point.
Definitely. And I think in a lot of our segments, you have mentioned that, it's a good idea to always have a professional to help someone with their estate plan. So, do you have any tips for people on how to best choose a professional to help them with that?
I do. And I'll do my very best tonight to condense a lot of information into this 30-minute segment. But I'm very passionate about this topic. So you might have to grab me by the shirt tail and slow me down a little bit. So, I think we should get into the what and why before we get into the who and how.
Mm.
Precisely. And we have spoken about what I would term foundational estate planning. And this is the type of estate planning that just about everyone over the age of 18 should have. And the plan will differ depending upon the complexities of the individual. So, for example, a person who's 18 likely could use a will, financial power of attorney, and a healthcare power of attorney, which we've spoken about in some of our segments. But like a blended family, it might be a little more complex. It may be revocable living trust with trusts developed throughout by that trust. So it may include multiple trusts, the planning, but it would almost always start with a revocable living trust. And so I talked about what is an estate plan during our very first session. So I kind of wanted to bring people into just what is an estate plan, because that term is thrown around. So I mentioned to someone today that I was an estate planning attorney, and they said, "Oh, that's great. What kind of estates do you sell?"
Oh gosh. I'm
So
sure
it
you
is,
probably have gotten that before too.
yeah, it is like this just nebulous term that People are like, okay, that's great. I need one. What is it? So session one, we really zeroed in on what that was, what that
Mhm.
is.
So then I remember you also talking about, I think this was either session one, maybe session two, but you spoke about the frequency in which an estate plan should be reviewed.
I did. I did. So I first talked about what an estate plan is. If you have one, how often you should review it. And
Mhm.
then moved on to the third session where we had Stephanie Van Slyke as a guest. She's an ethics professional at Munson, and she really helped drive home the need for a medical power of attorney and describe some issues that arise when a person does not have one. We
Mhm.
spoke of this because it helps speed assistance to an individual really having a healthcare crisis. It eliminates the need to go to the probate court to have a guardian assigned, and also ensures that the person that you trust more, if you're the planner, that you trust more will be providing decisions for your healthcare when you need them most.
Mhm.
So that was I think a very powerful session. And healthcare powers of attorney are part of an estate plan, the part of when you're alive.
And I think this would be a good time to mention too that if you miss any of our segments, that you can go back and watch the entire segment. We're just kind of doing a little recap of what we talked about, but each segment was 30 minutes. So you can go on our Up North Life Facebook page or YouTube page to get a full review of what exactly we talked about. But another thing that you mentioned, Marianne, that I think it was maybe the next segment that we talked about was the probate process.
I did talk about the probate process. Um, uh, Oftentimes, avoiding probate is one of the driving forces for people to complete an estate plan, at least when they walk in the door, right? And it's certainly not the full benefit of the plan, but it is very helpful to your loved ones to avoid probate, or at least to organize your estate in a manner in which probate would be easier for your family.
Mhm.
Again, will versus trust, and a lawyer will give you guidance on that. But avoiding probate makes it easier for your family. It often ensures that your assets are distributed. And I need to apologize, stop now and apologize for my audio. I am away from my office this week, and I am doing this from a hotel room. So I think my audio isn't perfect. My lighting surely isn't. So I thought I'd let people know.
It's
It's
not terrible though. It could be worse.
Thank you. I think when I move closer. So anyway, it is important to understand why you might want to avoid probate. Again, personal choice. It
Mhm.
might be fine. And so the following session, the fourth session, I spoke about ways in which to avoid probate. I think it was that session. It was either the fourth or the fifth.
Yeah.
I mean, it's getting, a little bit mixed up, but I wanted to bring that forward. I think the fourth, I talked about when's a good time to talk to your family about estate planning.
Mhm.
It was right before Thanksgiving, if you
Thanksgiving,
remember.
yep.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then fifth, I talked about probate, the probate process. And in the sixth, I spoke about ways to avoid probate, which of course are beneficiaries, titling your properties, and a revocable living trust is usually the most straightforward method.
Right. And then in our last segment, that was segment 7, we were joined by Caitlin Felinsky. She is a director of investments at Oppenheimer and Company, and she really helped with a conversation about funding a trust and the importance of that. And that session definitely made it very clear that a trust agreement that has not been funded does not accomplish a family's goal.
That's absolutely correct. I was so thankful to have Caitlin join us as well. That was a very important session. I have, uh, if your goal is to avoid probate, and you've chosen a revocable living trust to do as the vehicle to do so, then that revocable living trust needs to be funded, or all of your assets will still go through probate and end up in the revocable living trust through the probate process. And the probate process, you can go back to the session on probate. Again, done by caring people. It's not intended to be horrendous. but sometimes it can get out of hand. But when I have spoken with financial advisors as well as trust administrators on the topic, it seems they bring up over and over again frustrations with trusts that are not funded. And that's why I asked Caitlin to join, because she's seen this, right? And they've explained to me how funding is often left to the individual to complete, and that just the words, funding your trust or trusting your fund, right? um, it is just such a foreign concept when really it is identifying beneficiaries, and it's not as foreign as it may sound, but it's hard for people to get it done. And so just through interviewing and learning from financial advisors and trust administrators in 2024, my firm has begun to work hand in hand with each client to perform the funding. It's just simply a service that is key to the success of the plan. So I kind of look at funding as the fuel. And why purchase a speedboat if you're not going to put gasoline in it? So my firm will do the funding for you. It will need some intervention from you, because you'll need to maybe sign something, or but we'll work through that together. And I won't leave funding to my clients.
So, Marianne, I do kind of want to circle back to one of the first questions I asked you, and that was, can you help the audience know who they should hire if they do want to hire an attorney?
Absolutely. I think that's really, really important, because the practice of law is a little bit like the practice of medicine, where there are specialists, right? So I want to make sure that people understand that they should hire an attorney, that the drafting and working through estate planning is considered the practice of law. So if someone is doing this for you and they're not a lawyer, they're actually practicing law without a license, and they're not held to the ethical standards. They're not held to the disciplinary standards. They're not held to malpractice. So it's very important that someone chooses a lawyer that has the credentials.
Sure.
Just as in medicine, you wouldn't choose a surgeon who replaces knees to operate on your heart. You wouldn't. There's certain different credentials that a lawyer in Michigan should have. So this is where you need to understand the lawyer's background.
Mm-hmm.
Practice of estate planning includes understanding a large variety of laws, understanding property law, how to move property between individuals into the trust, the impact of it may have on property taxes, the impact it may have on the mortgage or title insurance. There's a lot of moving parts just in the property piece. There's a lot of moving parts in how to handle retirement accounts. There's IRS code, and that needs to be understood. There was recently a large act, I think we spoke about it before, but that's called the Secure Act, and it really impacts how qualified retirement accounts can be distributed. There's also Social Security Administration if you're dealing with a person who is maybe needing Medicaid, or if you're working with a special needs person. Then there's also disability law, there's business law, there's trust law and probate law, and that's just to name a few. And so to be a generalist and do lots of things, over time, it's hard to really learn everything about estate planning.
Sure.
And you become a specialist in the area that you practice most.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's just a natural thing. And within estate planning, there's actually subspecialties. So at the end of February, I'm going to be joined by a guest who specializes in special needs planning. And that is really where you don't want a mistake made about the most vulnerable person in your family. you're trying to take care of someone with special needs. So my point is that estate planning is multidimensional. There's this wave of all kinds of laws. Some of them conflict with others, and you have to know which one to choose for the right person in the right circumstances. So that's why I say it's a very complex planning strategy that results in the documentation, but it's applied by a lawyer who really recognizes um, that inner weave of and is trained, right? Remember, I've been trained as a lawyer, and so that's who I would say is make sure that your lawyer, the lawyer you choose a lawyer, right? Number one, and make sure that that lawyer really understands estate planning, um, and and then I would say that's a pretty good start.
So then
Right?
going off of that, are there any services that further distinguish a lawyer?
I think there are. I think there are services, and I mentioned one earlier, and that is the service I'm personally adding to all of my plans, and that's the service of funding a trust. That is, it's unique. I think it distinguishes my firm, and it's really an important piece. But you should also work with a lawyer who has a very personal touch, right? A lawyer who really wants to get to know you, who's really passionate about this area of law, because many lawyers that practice in this area are very passionate about it. They want it. They want the best for you and your family. So they want to make the rules right about how the distribution of your assets will occur. Who you want to take care of you as the healthcare directive during your life, who you want to take care of your finances if you no longer can. Who do you trust enough to really be in charge of your checkbook? And a lawyer who understands what that person may need to be able to do for future of you. So that lawyer needs to really get to know you. So my recommendation is you interview a lawyer, make sure you're comfortable with them because you're gonna kind of bare your soul to that person. This is what I want. Here's who I want it to go to. It's a hard decision between this and this. What's your opinion? So it's not always real simple. I think I've already talked about funding the trust. I'll beat that one. But I beg you, do not walk away from a lawyer with an unfunded trust. So if you're questioning whether your trust has been funded, that anybody watching tonight who has a revocable living trust, just give your lawyer a call and say, "Hey, talk to me about the funding of the trust." They'll probably help out. But even beyond getting the documents done, right? Signing the documents. In fact, I have a little secret. My husband and I are on vacation this week, and I am in Orlando, and I have a client from Michigan who wanted to sign their estate plan while we're here. So we're gonna sign it at Disney. So it's kind of
Oh,
fun.
nice.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. So it's the seamless experience. That's the relationship you build with your lawyers, and certainly that's an interesting relationship, right? I'm like, well, I'm going to be there. Why don't we,
Why
and
not?
we had to plan, right? So one of the elements I've added again to my firm is in a relationship sense type of way is I've added what I call a client care package. And it's really a plan it's a way of keeping in touch with my clients through time so that their plans don't stay are 10 years old, right? So for a very nominal, it's complimentary for the first year, very nominal fee, less than 2 hours of my time fee. Um, people can call me anytime they want. They can make minor changes to their planning. I'll make it without charge. I offer a legacy vault, which is an electronic vault where they can store all of their information, keep it all together, their electronic passwords. It's a very secure format. Um, and and I really am excited about that because it gives my firm the opportunity to build a lifelong relationship with my clients. Um, so that is something that that is, as I have surveyed estate planning attorneys throughout the country, that is something that I think is up and coming, is the ability to have a client care package, and not, like I say, a very nominal fee, that allows you to pick up the phone and call your attorney and ask them that question that's bothering you, instead of thinking, oh, if I call them, I'm going to have to pay them and I don't want to pay an invoice. So, and I think that through that relationship building, through that kind of free and easy relationship, um, the plans that we structure over the years, because we'll keep them updated easier, will really benefit um, the clients of my firm.
Sure.
So those are a few things to look for: is how they service you now, what their view is into the future. Um, I think traditionally, years ago, an estate plan was something that was a will. You finished it, you signed it, and you put it on the shelf. And maybe 20 years later dusted it off, but no longer. It's a really should be a, you don't have to live and die by it, but it should be a very important part of your life. And if you visit, and then the other thing is I ask my clients who have the client care package to schedule an annual checkup once a year. You do that with your, for your health. This is your financial health and the health of your long term. So
Yeah.
those are a few things, few ideas.
Yeah, that's definitely a really great service that you offer with that client care package. And you mentioned a couple of what I would call like green flags that you should look for in an attorney. Do you have any, I guess it's different for everyone, but any like red flags that you think people should, maybe if they hear their potential attorney talking about this or this, that they should maybe avoid that?
Yeah, that'd be really hard to state. Attorneys are people who are certainly able to research the law.
Mhm.
I think that that y- I yeah, I really don't. I mean, I would say, a red flag is they don't specialize in it. And that doesn't mean that's 100% specialization in this area, but it is, like I say, there's so many laws. Having an attorney who specializes in it is a green flag.
Yeah.
Um, Going to an attorney who does, probate, trust administration, estate planning, that's a great thing. Um, and believe me, there's a need. There's I think statistically 70% of the people in in our state do not have estate plans. So there's a need for lots of there's room.
Sure.
It's an abundance. So I don't really have any red flags.
Okay. So I do want to also mention that we have Marianne's contact information in the comments below if you do want to reach out to her. I'm going to try to put it up on the screen. Oh, yeah, there we go. That's on the
Oh,
screen now as
perfect.
well. So, yeah, if you have any questions, that is her website right there and then her phone number. So you can go ahead and reach out or give her a call. But yeah, Marianne, just like that, I know this happens every single session. Boom, snap our fingers, we're done. So,
I know. We get 3/4 into it. I'm thinking, oh, I got to start talking fast.
Speed it up a bit. But I thought that this was a really good session to kind of recap everything that we've talked about because, as we've mentioned, we have talked about a lot of very important topics over the past 7, now 8 segments. So it's kind of nice just to go through them all and pick out the very important nuggets and just nice little
Yeah.
refresh.
And help someone know, you don't have to listen to every single one. Listen to this one and then you'll pick it out.
Yeah.
But and we'll do this, periodically. Uh, this is probably good timing every 8 weeks or so to kind of summarize. Then you don't have too much bouncing around.
Right.
But yeah, I really appreciate everyone's viewing, and thank you for the questions. The question was very good tonight.
Mhm.
And so I appreciate that.
Yeah. So again, a reminder, if you do have any questions for Marianne that you want us to talk about on this segment, you can always leave a comment live, or if you would prefer to send us an email, you can email our newsroom, which is just newsroom@upnorthlive.com, and maybe make the subject line "Ask the Attorney" just so it kind of stands out. And we will get to those questions in our future segments. But for now, thanks everyone so much for joining us tonight, and we will see you all again in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye now.
Bye, everyone.